It is the science of business tonight, and we're going to look at the science of marketing. Do you get more bang for your buck as a business if you put your marketing spend into sports sponsorship or into the arts? Guests tonight, Michael Goldman, Senior Lecturer in Sports Marketing and Sponsorship at Gibbs, and Tony Lancaster, the Chief Executive of the National Arts Festival, on a visit to the big city.
Bruce Whitfield on The Money Show.
If you are a marketer and you're sitting on a big budget and you don't know where to send it, do you sponsor cricket? Do you sponsor soccer? Do you sponsor hockey? No, what would you? Yes, maybe you will. Would you sponsor the arts, the ballet, the opera, or maybe some ethnic music of some description? Maybe a play or something nice. What works better, sports sponsorship or sponsorship of the arts? Michael Goldman, Senior Lecturer in Sports Marketing and Sponsorship at Gibbs. I'm guessing he's going to go on the side of sport. And Tony Lancaster, Chief Executive at the National Arts Festival in Grahamstown. Both gentlemen in our studio this evening. Tony Lancaster, let's start off with you. What is the arts sponsorship proposition?
I don't know. I'm bullish on rugby at the moment, actually.
You'd know a rugby ball would hit you in the face. Forgive me, Tony. I've known you for 20 years.
Right, Bruce, in the marketing mix, essentially, if you want to reach your consumers, and every brand wants to do that, they want to have conversations with their consumers. There are several ways you can reach them. You can reach them through advertising, which is going to your consumers through their eyes and ears, or you can try and reach them through their heart, and that's really where sponsorship comes into play. You tap into the passions of your consumers, the things that they are passionate about, the things that they love, that they spend their free time doing. You become an integral part of that experience. You get credit for creating that experience, and the customers have a propensity to choose your brand.
That sounds like sport.
Does it?
It does a lot. It does, Michael Goldman, sound a lot like sport, doesn't it? I mean,
absolutely.
That's why companies throw many hundreds of millions of rand in sports sponsorship, don't they?
Yes, absolutely, and much more than they do at the moment into art. And it's about connecting emotionally to the thing that's really important in that person's life. And although art is a key part of some people's lives in our country and across the continent, sport is a much bigger part of people's lives, and they get more emotional. And the more emotional you get, the more a brand, if the fit is there, and that's really important, the brand fit between the sport and the corporate or the product brand. If that fit is there, you can leverage that a lot more and get a lot more out of it than you can from something that perhaps does play a part in people's lives, but it's a weaker emotional part.
I suppose, Tony Lancaster, if you are in the spot, he's limbering up and ready for a fight this evening, which is good. But Tony Lancaster, I mean, it's all well and good if you sign up to a sports team when that sports team is doing well, and you sign a 5-year sponsorship deal, and in year two, the team goes pear-shaped, the coach goes mad and has to be taken outside and shot, and the team starts underperforming. In the arts, it tends to be a lot more individual, I would argue. You know, you can sponsor an orchestra, for example, and the conductor can go bonkers. But that sort of stuff can happen.
Probably already bonkers.
That's not a bad thing for the performance.
It helps in the arts.
So
yes.
There's a couple of things here. First of all, it's not a clear cut and dried thing, sports versus art, because I think any responsible corporate needs to have a balanced portfolio. However, as you quite rightly point out, in sports, someone is going to lose. Today, whoever sponsors the Dutch cricket team is feeling a little bit bleak.
Yes.
50% of your audience is going to be disappointed. Do you really want to be associated with that experience? That's the first thing. Now, I want to take Michael to task on something.
Okay, then, fine, we'll come back to it, yes. Michael, remember the point you wanted to fight with Tony about.
Michael said that sport is more of a part of people's lives than the arts. I'm not sure where he gets it from, but I would suggest that more South Africans know how to sing than how to play squash. More South Africans read books than play rugby. The arts, to say that more South Africans are participants in sport or have sport has a bigger role in their life than arts, I think that's nonsensical.
But it is easier to fill the FNB stadium for a big sports event than it is for...
That.
Yeah, but U2 is a foreign
Tell
act.
the Parlotones. Tell Ladysmith Black Mambazo.
Okay. Have they filled FNB stadium?
They could.
They could.
I think
that remains to be seen.
The difference is whether you play physically or play emotionally. And I think the thing about sport is we are all wanting to play sport. And when we watch the national rugby team or the national hockey team, we see ourselves in that, especially if they represent us in some way, be it patriotic or athletic or whatever it is. And so we live our lives through their performances. So yes, I think there is a limit to how many people can actually be on the field. And so I think what people do as spectators and fans and supporters and passionate supporters is they live their lives through the performances of others and they play emotionally as opposed to play physically. The issue I was going to raise earlier about winning versus losing, yes, it's true that it is often easier for executives to justify support for sport when the team is winning. But what we know about sports sponsorship is what makes sport so unique and heightens the emotional element of sport is the uncertainty principle. And really basically what that means is you don't know who's going to win. And as long as you don't know who's going to win, you're engaged. And as long as you're engaged, is an opportunity for a brand to communicate and tell a story and talk and bring you in. And so, in fact, the chances of a team losing always adds to the emotional angst, which is an opportunity for a brand to engage.
Okay,
What I find interesting is that when motivating why sports sponsorship is great, we always resort to art metaphors. We're telling stories, aren't we? We're drawing people in. And that just shows the genuine power of the art. And the fact is that an individual sitting in a darkened theatre being moved by a song, by a play, by a dance, whatever the case might be, is as powerful for that individual as someone who's sitting on the edge of their seat because Bafana are one goal up and it's the last 3 minutes.
But do you concede, Tony, that selling an art sponsorship is a far harder job than selling a sports sponsorship?
I do, and there's many reasons for that. And the one reason for that is the arts community has been lousy at selling themselves in the past. They really are not good.
But the one thing going in art's favor is it's cheaper.
Yes.
And so it's way more affordable. We talk about rights and leverage. And certainly if you look at all the numbers, it's suggesting that to get into the arts is way more affordable than getting into any of the top sports at the moment.
But then it's a question of the return on investment. I mean, do you get more bang for your buck in the arts, or so you concur, you get more bang for your buck in the sport?
Conversation over.
Thank you. We'll play songs until the top.
It really depends. It depends on your objective and it depends on the target market that you're after.
Sure.
But because from a ROI point of view, if the investment is lower and you're able to get strong returns, obviously the ROI is going to be positive. Whereas with sport, you have to invest so much more in terms of rights and then hopefully one-to-one in terms of leverage. Getting an ROI is often very, very tough. And that's why companies unfortunately rely on media spend and media coverage to justify ROI, when in fact that's the last thing that's actually relevant to selling stuff for the company.
I think we need to have a bit of a discussion around, because I agree with everything that Michael's saying, that not everything. Everything you just said.
The little Pyrrhic victories that we won in the studio this evening were astonishing. Yes.
But I think it's important to go into why companies sponsor things. And there's a whole bunch of reasons. Some of those needs are satisfied by having your logo on screen during a soccer match, or by having a hoarding at the side of a sports field, or your logo on the team of the national, on the jersey of the national rugby team. That's fine. Those are part of those reasons. But there's a whole bunch of other reasons that are equally valid, and it all depends where a brand is in its life cycle. What do we need to do as a brand? How do we need to unpack this? And where are we going to get our bang for our buck? Do we want to own rugby for 100 million rand, or do we want to own the dance umbrella for under 1 million rand?
And rugby would be 1 billion rand.
To own rugby? Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, apps is 1 billion rand.
And the question is anyone going to notice if we spend 100 million rand on rugby? There's so many logos. There's so many signs. The last time you watched rugby, in fact, you watched cricket today. Name me one brand that you saw on the side of the field.
Oops.
You see? There's so much clutter. You're going to leave
I was watching the game.
But everyone knows that Standard Bank is involved in the National Arts Festival. Everyone knows.
Standard Bank does cricket. Oh no, they used to do cricket. At that point, we will pause.
For the next few weeks they do.
And we will pause at that particular point. But absolutely, the points that are raised this evening are really interesting. If you want to add to our discussion tonight, 021 446 0567 011 883 0702. Who sponsors the Springboks? We all know that, don't we? Boy, that Sasol sponsorship was money well spent.
Bruce Whitfield on The Money Show.
Tanya in Vanderbijl Park, you work for Sasol, do you?
Yes, I do. I'm actually in the human resources field, and we're operating internationally. And in our recruitment drive, it's actually been helped by the fact that Sasol does sponsor the Springboks, because a lot of times our brand is not international as yet. And when we go in for recruitment drives, what has happened is people will say, oh yes, you guys are the guys that sponsor the Springboks. We've seen your name. So it helps create familiarity in areas that you're not a brand yet.
You must be really grumpy with Pat Davies then from an HR perspective that he stopped sponsoring the Springboks.
Yeah, but there's other advantages in other areas that we are entering into. So as the company grows in those countries, we develop our own brand in any event. So
but it's a nice point. Thank you, Tanya. And Eunice in Lenasia, you're going to remind us of who sponsors the Springboks again?
The new sponsors are Absa Bank.
Of course they are, Eunice. Absolutely right. How much do you think they're spending on sponsoring the Springboks? I mean, something Michael Goldman said earlier was 1 billion rand. I thought that's a little bit excessive over 5 years.
Yes, quite a bit of money.
That's quite a bit of money. Eunice, Indonesia. Tony makes an interesting point about brand association, and it's simply an awareness. And you've got your name on a rugby jersey, for goodness sake, and I've personally never seen the value of it, but brand-minded people do, and that's one example.
Yeah, I mean, there's really three buckets of objectives that corporates often have when they invest in sport, and I guess it often applies to art as well. The first is about awareness, so it's exposure, getting your name out there, and certainly Investec sponsorship of Spurs in the Cup competitions, Sasol sponsorship of the Springboks internationally was partly about awareness, so moving into markets and getting their name out there to be seen as a big player. But that's all you can really achieve at that space. The real important space is around brand associations. What does this company mean? What does this brand mean to me? And there it's about the fit between the chemical or oil brand and the team around performance or whatever. But ultimately, at the end of the day, for ROI, it's about selling stuff. And so how does the sponsorship through your leverage, your activation budget, and the fit in what you do around it, make sure that for that target market, you are selling more stuff?
Now, ABSA you would traditionally associate with rugby. It's an amalgamation of traditionally Afrikaans banks. A big proportion of the big money earners who bank with ABSA, a lot of them are Afrikaans speaking. Rugby, the associations are strong. It's all there. But ABSA also branching into soccer, which is interesting.
Well, certainly ABSA, I think, want to see themselves as a huge retail bank that really plays in the things that are important in people's lives. And so as a large retail player, certainly you've got to go for football and for rugby. And they've certainly done that in a significant way, taking everything. I don't think you need to take everything, but they've certainly decided to do that. And that's their approach. How they execute that in terms of the products and the services that ABSA is providing to its customers, and linking that in either to existing customers or prospective customers, and the increased marginal revenue and the profitability from that at the end of the day will determine whether it's a good spend or not. It's all nice and good to be the bank behind the box. But if that bank is not getting much more bang for their money behind the box, then it's a nice spend.
Something that Standard Bank tried years ago was to sell Manchester United branded and Kaiser Chiefs branded Barclay cards at the time. Now you'd think that ABSA would be able to have a Springbok Barclay card, a Springbok Visa card, for example.
Well, you certainly saw that. I mean, Nedbank did a really interesting with their Kiona Cup as part of the SAFA, the knockout competition.
Oh, Kiona, not
Kiona.
Kiona sounds like I don't know, a South Korean, a South Korean photocopier or an opera singer.
Opera singer. There we go.
But Kiona, it is ours. Yes.
Yes. And so for that cup competition, which is all about anyone having the opportunity to live the dream, they specifically put together a Kiona package of products and services available to that target market.
Did the target market buy the packages and services?
Some did fly off the shelf. I haven't seen the ROI numbers, but certainly they seem to get some traction.
Tony.
Bruce, I said earlier that the one thing that corporates really want to do is start having conversations with their customers. And one of the core reasons for sponsorships of any kind is to deepen their relationships with their existing customers by associating yourself with something that the customer is passionate about. It opens all sorts of doors to have conversations, and it starts with the high-end clients. And a lot of corporate sponsor things so they can take high-end clients to something. Boxes at stadiums, a luxury train down to Grahamstown, whatever the case might be. Those are great activation things. But the big pity in South Africa's marketing scene is the extent to which corporates have been slashing their leverage and activation budgets.
You've used that term a couple of times, leverage and activation budgets. Both of you nod knowingly. You know exactly what it is. I pretend I know, and there are a lot of people going, what's leverage and activation? I don't know either.
So rights would be what you purchase to get the rights to associate your brand, your company, with a certain property, be it an art or a sponsored property. Right. So I purchase the right to some kind of activity at the arts festival, or some kind of competition, or some kind of dramatic event, or I purchase the right to a knockout competition in hockey, for example. That gives me exclusive category rights, i.e. no other competitor of mine can come in and play in that space, and it gives me the space, and I might get certain media benefits for that. But if I only buy the rights, that's all I get. And I really don't get any value beyond that. I then need to spend, and it's recommended 1-to-1, I need to spend what's called an activation or a leverage budget to go out there and tell the world that I am a sponsor and that I'm doing this. And for my target market, with its existing or prospective customers, to do stuff that uses that platform to activate that relationship, to deepen the relationship. I mean, you talk about the festival. One of the major financial services brands in this country was talking to me a few days ago about the huge value they see in taking that selected group of loyal customers down to Grahamstown and spending 3 days in a relaxed environment and having conversations. And they can't buy that. So it's invaluable to them that space, especially in an art environment, that space in a relaxed space to try and explore some of those things.
Now, you're hoping I don't say, boy, that's Standard Bank, isn't it? Because Standard Bank, of course, does have an association with the festival and has pulled back from cricket sponsorship, for example, is pulling back. So it's re-looked at the way in which it utilizes its sponsorship budget. Tony, a question for you.
Yes.
And it comes from Marissa, who's a publicist for the opera singer Stefan Louw, www.stefanlouw.co.za.
Hello, Marissa.
Her question is, why do rugby players have sponsored vehicles, but internationally acclaimed opera singers in our country do not? I mean,
Great question.
it isn't a valid one.
It is a valid question. And I think it comes back to the value that the owners or the brand, so it's the BMWs or the Rolls Royces or whoever, it's all about return. And they would far rather, at this stage, I suppose, tap into the fans that James Small has, or Joost has.
The last time you watched rugby, those two were still playing rugby, not
Isn't
silly
Joost
buggers
still
off the
playing?
fields. No.
Okay, well, you want to be associated
Yes.
with Graham Smith because he's got this huge following, he's on television all the time, etc., etc.
It's got 60,000 Twitter followers, yes.
Yeah, quite. It's cool. Whereas opera is a particularly, within arts, it's a very limited following.
Yeah.
It's a much smaller following. I would argue that your opera fan is as passionate about opera as your rugby fan is about rugby, which makes the value proposition for a sponsor wanting to access opera far greater.
But until a manufacturer brings out an Allegro, for example, and opera singers, I'm like, that's quite clever,
Exactly.
wasn't it?
It was pretty good.
Thank you.
Very good. I guess the one thing beyond ROI and the commercial considerations of any sponsorship is the personal motivations to sponsor. And I think we certainly see that more in the arts than in sport. I think sport has become a lot more commercial.
Which football team does the Investec chief executive Stephen Kosseff support?
The one with Investec on the shirt.
Oh yes.
So there's a lot of that in sponsorship.
Yeah,
world.
Absolutely.
It really is.
And I think sports sponsorship has matured slightly out of that, but it still plays a big role. And I think still the players that are driving around in cars that are sponsored, I think there's some personal relationships there that still play a role. And so I don't think we can discount that from this very commercial conversation about returns. In the art space, certainly I see that more and more with senior executives, chairpersons, chief executives, shareholders of major organizations who have a huge passion for the arts, and that's what drives the spend of their organizations. ROI is important, and it's kind of in the conversation, but often it's that driver.
Tony.
I want to get a mention of Business and Arts South African because they do an amazing job in amplifying the extent to which corporates can get value from their sponsorship of the arts. And they conduct all sorts of research, and they're doing a great job in helping professionalize the arts industry because the arts industry, as I said earlier, is not very good at going out
You've
and
got
approaching
artists
things.
who go out and say, well, it's going to cost me 10,000 rand to
Exactly
put
right.
on the show, not the value I will add to your brand by coming and doing the dancing monkey routine
Yeah.
on the stage at your
I
conference.
saw this when I was on the other side of the fence listening to sponsorship proposals for a financial services company. Exactly that. Artists would come and say, please, can you help me? It's going to cost me 10,000 rand. I've got to get bus tickets and food and da-da. Whereas the sports guys would come in and they would say, the value to your company to sponsor this is 100,000 rand.
The reality in South Africa is the arts are much smaller than sport. What you're doing with the festival, the Grahamstown Festival, is really interesting because you're teaming up with other festivals around
Yeah.
the world and you're going to global brands. And you're saying global brands, you're probably not interested in buying the Grahamstown Festival, but hold on a second, we can sell you Edinburgh, San Francisco and others.
We're part of a World Festival Alliance, which is ourselves, Adelaide, Edinburgh, Prague, Dubai, Amsterdam, Los Angeles. And exactly that. We collectively have an audience of 3.5 million people a year, which immediately puts us right up there with the Olympics and the FIFA World Cup in terms of scale and ability to reach people. So we've simplified the process for global corporates. One contract will get you to sponsor all 7 of those festivals instead of 7 contracts, 7 different activation plans and so
Are
on.
people biting?
It's very early days yet, but we've had some very interesting interest from some pretty blue chip brands out there, yeah.
It's interesting though, isn't it, Michael, in terms of the sponsorship, because it all suddenly, things were thrown up in the air toward the end of last year, where Sasol decided not to sponsor the box anymore because it was too expensive to do. We had Standard Bank announcing its withdrawal from cricket. But other companies came into that breach, filled that breach, and possibly are paying as much, if not more, for those sponsorships. So the world of sponsorship is alive and well. Just because some brands come and go, it doesn't necessarily mean the death of sponsorship.
Absolutely. It's about that brand's objective and where they are in their life cycle. But it is also a marketplace. And so there are willing buyers and willing sellers. And sometimes if a rights holder, a rugby team, for example, goes to market with a certain number, and the sponsors reject that number, well, they paint themselves into a bit of a corner. And so certainly I think it's willing buyer, willing seller, and some of these numbers aren't well known. And so I think opportunities will always be out there. I certainly encourage sponsors and prospective sponsors in sport and the arts to look at things that are less well covered. So in sport, obviously look beyond the big three sports and look at what's happening in hockey and what this radio station has done with the men's hockey team, for example. Look at what's happening in some of the other sports. Look what's happening regionally out of Gauteng, for example. And then in the arts, look at some of those arts that aren't getting major attention, because they're the opportunities at low rights fees with a significant leverage, with the right target market to really get at some results.
Imagine if you went into the Cricket World Cup as sponsors of the Irish. What a good deal you got a month ago.
Absolutely.
And what they're doing now, for example. Tony, I mean, last word to you. You always have it. Without sponsorship, the arts are in serious trouble. I mean, as sports would be without sponsorship, it is the way of the 21st century.
Absolutely. And at the moment, there's a core group of fantastically loyal and passionate sponsors of the arts out there. There's, I can probably name 10 corporates out there who really put their heart, soul, guts, and checkbooks behind the arts.
Do they get value for money?
I would argue they do. Something like Standard Bank, which has sponsored us for 27 years, would have stopped a long time ago if they were not getting value.
Well, they stopped in sport, didn't they? Oops.
But they didn't stop in art.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thanks to Michael Goldman, Senior Lecturer in Sports Marketing and Sponsorship at Gibbs, and Tony Lancaster, Chief Executive of the National Arts Festival in Grahamstown, who took a day out in the big smoke to come and talk to us tonight. A Word on Psychology is next. Colinda Linda is joining Lee for an hour-long open line on all psychology-related questions. Perhaps you want to talk about the psychology of sponsorship. It is 8 o'clock. Thanks for listening. Back tomorrow. Small business focus tomorrow night. Pablo Fatidis in studio from 7 till 8 o'clock tomorrow night to help you with all your small business issues. That's it from us. Good night.